weeks since I last filmed, and it's coming on. I lost 3 days to this horrendous head cold, but I've spent 4 or 5 working sessions on it since I last filmed, working on the tower, both the detachable top bit and the bottom bit, just starting to, you can just about see it here and there, adding some slight coloration to odd stones. It's not working everywhere. It's just a case of adding on sort of glaze or wash, which is Mod Podge sepia ink and water, trying to just differentiate some of the stones, but just very slightly. It's going to take a long time and a lot of patience. Just trying to break up the uniformity of the colour on those, and the windows have been. I spent hours making these, just these 2, and as there's 15 windows to do, just to come on the first floor, and then there's floors above that, I decided I've actually got to find a better way of doing that. I've also run out of the artificial horn, so I made some more. I forgot my steel rule, so I can't make any progress on that, but I'm going to have to make sheets of overlapping horn and then cut them to size, rather than cutting long strips which are about 3mm wide and gluing them onto the backs of the windows with tweezers, because that was just way too fiddly and frustrating. And the painting the wattle and the timbers and the daub of the first floor has taken an absolute age. The white needs 2 coats, and you have to do it quite patiently, otherwise you're painting black over the white bits and white over the black bits. But now I've got to this stage, I've also got to finally confront a problem that I've been aware of for a long time. This block here, which is the bit the other side of the ginnel on the first floor, is wrong. It's not level with this, and I've been scratching my head. Have I cut the blocks incorrectly? Did I muddle them up? And no, it's not been bothering me that much, but I've been putting aside finding a solution to that while I've been doing the more patient bits, like the brick chimney. And it finally occurred to me tonight to put that against there, and it's right. So it's this piece that's wrong. Somehow this was I muddled up the blocks or something, and the bit I originally had cut that was going to go here went somewhere else, on the scrap pile maybe, and it's the line up there to there that is the issue. Now, the best thing to do would be to just work with it, because that's the idea. The idea is it is a medieval building that's slumped, it's had subsidence, it's been, more floors have been built on top, something that modern planners wouldn't allow because of the structural integrity of the building. Or I could cut it off, it's glued on, and put in an extra row of blocks, which would make the whole thing a lot easier. That as well, when I mash up the backs, the jetty isn't right. The jetty is nowhere near as substantial as this. And that's because the back of this section doesn't line up with the back of that section, which means this is actually too long. I can stick it out more so the jetty's like that. If I do that, I've got to cut the back of this piece away. I think you can just about see or imagine what that's going to be. And when this goes on, the second floor, the bit that I've already started sort of experimenting on, and I made a terrible regret here, because those windows would be much easier because I cut them out and I kept the pieces. I didn't keep the pieces from here because I hadn't thought of doing that then. So these windows are all going to have to be carefully hand cut, and I could have just avoided that. This is going to be the bridge over the ginnel, which I'm worried about being a bit boring. Maybe if I just work with that collapse and then collapse this part of the second floor to fit it and put in like a stepped bridge and then a stepped balcony. The balcony thing's going to be here. I think I'm just going to have to be brave. I'm just going to have to work with it. And now the whole side, the whole semi-detached side of the sign of the Silent Woman is going to be more slumped than the larger side. It's going to be tricky. A bit more thinking and sanding these areas that were botched with plaster, and I'm going to go with it. The jetty is going to come out its full length, and there's going to have to be some sort of, I don't know, little wall bodge up structure at the back, which is what you'd do if there'd been differing substance. But I've just noticed that this front bit has got more damage than this end of the side bit, which is going to be where the building is sheared away from the neighbouring building. So the next little job is to preserve and use that. So I'm going to cut the front off, and I'm going to cut this section out of here, which is actually smoother on the inside than the outside, which matches the surface of that. So that section is going to be cut out and stuck in here. This section is going to be cut out, reversed, and is going to become the new front. Now, I nearly made a bad mistake. I was going just sort of at the stage now where this floor is roughly finished, apart from the detailing, and I was going to glue this floor onto that floor and start working on this slumped side of the building, and I knew something was wrong. The next stage was to put the beams along here which support the jetty, and I knew it was wrong. I just had to stop and drink a lot more coffee and start looking at some source material again, and it was worth doing that because I figured out what I was overlooking, and it's the fact on this rather garish orange buildings that the top of the lower story is there, and then the frames of the upper story are here. There's actually a layer in between. So the way these buildings work is you have to think always in modules. There's a box, and on top of the box there's a platform, a raft of timbers that go all the way through the building, and then another box goes on top. And if you could look down on the sky at that raft, you'd see in a square corner building certainly this kind of a structure of beams. This is the aerial view, and this long diagonal one, which would be very hard to source, very expensive, you remember, is the dragon beam. So where I was about to stick that bit that represents the dragon beam on there, what I actually have to do is stick it there, and I've just been cutting a load of timbers, which I'm not going to really do it going all the way through, but I'm going to have to put those beams sticking towards me in the direction my fingers running, and then fill the gaps in between, or stick a beam along there and then stick those bits of those beams on to suggest those support beams to actually get that right. But it was thinking through and kind of remembering back to why that dragon beam is so important and how the whole thing works. I think I'd have lost a lot of authenticity there if I hadn't have paused to think my way through that one.
Saturday.
I'm in York again, and there's my daughter chuntering away, but I'm not really listening to her because that building is exactly what I'm thinking about at the moment for what I need to do next on the house. Other side of the river. And there's medieval churches and amazing buildings everywhere. Let's see if we can look at it front on. Look at the way it bends under its weight. That's what's unique about timber frame buildings compared to modern buildings. I'm in heaven here because there's jetted timber frame buildings and you can see how they're constructed and they're stunning. And it's a very busy York on a Saturday. And this is the Cat Cafe. You can have coffee and have pussycats at your table. Might be going there later. Back from a weekend in York after a grueling motorway drive today, and I hadn't meant to shoot any more footage of medieval buildings in York, but I was just at this stage thinking about this exact thing, and then suddenly there I was on a busy afternoon walking through York, just coming up to Christmas, streets packed, so it wasn't ideal for filming, as you could probably tell from those last few clips, but there they were, multi-layered timber frame buildings, and what was apparent was exactly this issue, which is how do we cope with this frontage. And I was just starting to think what happens is the long beams bend under the weight of the building, they bow. So that might actually be my solution here. This is now been glued on. I can't put heavy weights on it. It's just the sort of slight weight of the first aid kit. You see, you should always have a first aid kit in the workshop or studio. They come in useful. Maybe that will give me the solution or part of the solution. I need to cut in to this to make a bowed beam there. It would have been better if I'd have thought of it earlier and actually got this beam, this bowed as well. But I might possibly be able to just trim or sand some up there to make that a little bit more bowed. And I'm not sure it's going to actually be enough to cope with the step down there, but maybe have a bowed beam and then a subsidence event. But that's the next step anyway. It's to take this slightly convex line and cut into it. I wish I'd have thought of doing it earlier. I don't really want to cut into the top of that window, so it's only going to be a case of, I suppose, a centimetre at most there. Now that is a piece of wet string, and it's making a catenary curve, which is the shape you get when you hang a chain end to end, or a rope, providing that rope has got some sort of weight. And you might be thinking, what's that got to do with the price of pickled eggs? Well, it's a nice natural curve. It's slightly different to a parabola in mathematics. Mathematicians can actually explain what a catenary curve is and how it works in terms of trigonometry and everything, stuff like that, but that's way beyond my pay grade. I'm going to trace along that with a pencil. and then go along with my hot wire cutter, and hopefully I'll get something that looks sort of right. But probably nobody will ever notice, and nobody will ever know, and nobody will ever care. Nobody will ever care, nobody will ever care, except for me and you. Possibly not even you. Correcting where I've cut that bit out there to make sure the beam stays a consistent width, and then the rest of the evening is to start putting in the bits here that are the raft, as I've called it, and cutting up actual timbers now, which is something I always wanted to avoid, but they're going to be the bits that come out there. The difficulty is going to be with the styro glue, which doesn't have actually any tackiness, so it's going to be, we're going to have to be pinned into place. And because I couldn't really apply much weight, because the whole thing is still supported on that tiny little peg, you remember it's just the weight of the first aid box on the top, I'm going to have to slap some glue down into those joints and things between the two floors as well, just to give it, make sure it's got some structural strength. I do when I'm walking around the studio sometimes catch it with my shoulder or elbow, so occasionally take some wax. It's got to have the structural strength to take the odd accidental knock. It's looking good with all these pieces in place, but they've all got to be painted, and it took a lot of time to do them. It took a lot more time to add in the extra couple of rows to the brick chimney. I'm not even showing you under there because it's not as neat as I would have liked it to have been done. Still haven't actually put the doors in place. I did decide when I was doing that corner that my dragon's head, which is actually fixed onto the dragon beam, that's the dragon beam here, I'm pleased with that bit. Nobody will ever see it because it's a good sort of double mitered joint. I decided that that really does need some wings, and just using the thick hot knife gouged out by, I was able to do it by just bringing the hot tool, which is this one, very close to the foam, not even touching it, and I like the way I've got a boxy effect, like they've taken the ends of two old beams and chiseled them out to make them look a bit like a dragon's wing. I think I've got the right look of a naive sculpture there. I'm not happy with the black that I originally painted this, so I definitely think I'm going to have to paint it red and green and try to make it look weathered or something at a later stage. But I've got an hour or two now to work on it, and I'm working on this piece before trying to do the bridge, and those white areas of daub all need 2 coats of the emulsion paint. I'm not able to work on this side of the building, I've decided, until I've done the whole thing, and I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do at the back there to get over that step. Haven't figured that out yet, but just repaint, doing a second coat of paint on all of here, and then painting the beams in my very dark grey, and neatening up some of the bits on there is work and patience.